You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Hello and welcome to another edition of News Bite Scotland, your tasty morsel of bite-sized response to the news with myself, Peter Newman, and with disability rights campaigner and freelance journalist, Michael McEwan. Hello, Michael. Thank you very much for joining me again. How are you?
Hello, Peter. Yeah. It's been a bit of a quiet time. Nothing's really been happening. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm happy to be back, and I know that you've been busy.
It's been quite a time. So for those that don't know, I was helping out on one of the campaigns, and I was also covering the election results in the Highlands for one of the local newspapers up here. So we had a very late night as Highland Council ended up not releasing the results of the Highland regional vote until about 1:30 a.m. Opinions differ as to why they were done, considering they've had 19 hours to count them before. We are led to understand that there was a printer error, whatever that means. We all know how difficult printers are. But nonetheless, I suspect there's more to come on that story later on. There'll be a report issued because I think people were getting really quite cross. We were the last 7 seats in the whole of Scotland to be declared. And in fact, after 2024, where it went to a third recount, or to be accurate, a second recount, but a third count, people are asking questions of the Highland Council and their election responses. Before we go on to the fallout of the Scottish election and everything, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit in our immediate responses. So on the night of the count, Michael very kindly sent me a short clip about his immediate initial knee-jerk response to the election results, and I also recorded something from the count as well. So at this point, we're going to edit that into the show so you can see how we were feeling and how I was quite frazzled, wasn't I, Michael, about 10 o'clock?
Yes, you were. Yeah.
There'll be about 4 minutes of content here.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Okay, so it's been a long day, and it's nearly finished. Gives a couple more counts to go before they wrap up, and we know who will make up the next term in the Scottish Parliament. SNP had a brilliant day. We're going to reflect that as me and Peter does our podcast roundup. Should be the early part of next week. But looking at Mark and Skitson is Cunningham South, and it's welcome to Patricia Gibson. Of course, most folk would remember Patricia Gibson sitting in Westminster. Unfortunately, she didn't get voted in the last general election, but she's in the Scottish Parliament, and she'll be joining her husband. Yeah, that's right, her husband, Kenneth Gibson. He's been a long-standing member of the SNP, and he got in Cunningham North. So he got in Cunningham North, and Patricia Gibson getting Cunningham South. And I'm just wondering, Peter, if a man, if a married couple got in to neighbouring constituencies before, maybe someone can let me know in the comments below. So yeah, that's who really got into the constituency in Cunningham South and Cunningham North. We'll be doing a special podcast looking back at the results, putting out the main headlines of the day, and believe it or not, it's been a busy old day.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Hi, Michael. Welcome to News Bite Scotland's instant reaction to the election. You find me at the Inverness Count, where I have been freelancing for a local newspaper. It has been nationally a very good day for the SNP, but personally for the Highlands and Islands SNP, it's been quite rough. we've lost Caithness Sutherland Ross, MSP Marie Todd, who was also the Minister for Drugs and Alcohol. We also were defeated in Badenoch, Skye and Lochaber. Andrew Baxter, the Lib Dem, taking that. We held on to Inverness and Nairn. Emma Roddick moving from the list to the constituency there. So a mixed bag. We're now waiting for the list results. We are confident, very confident that we can get a list seat, but that will also be true of the Lib Dems as well, we think. So it's been a very mixed bag. It does look like the vote share going down has hurt us, and nationally obviously there's the picture with Reform getting elected. So yeah, it's difficult because after 20 years in government for the SNP to have over 50 seats is actually an incredible achievement, but on a personal level and in the Highlands it doesn't feel like it at the moment.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Welcome back to News Bite Scotland. You've just had our 3-day or 4-day-old response to the thing. That was how we were feeling at the time. Right, Michael, with a bit more time to reflect, how are you feeling about the election now?
Yeah, I'm okay. First of all, it was a wee bit different this year because I got to see all the results instead of watching the results and falling asleep on the couch because it was overnight. But yeah, it was a long day, Peter. I don't know about you, but I was watching the TV from 9:30 until 8 o'clock that night, and right in the middle of it, I had a football show, so it was quite a busy day, and my notepad was taken up by who get in, who gained seats, and all the rest of it. Yeah, it was quite a good day for the SNP. They never got the majority, but you could still say that they hands down that they won the kind of like election with 58 seats. And I'll probably go into it in more detail in a bit, Peter. But I was actually quite surprised, and John Sweeney has done a hell of a good job to turn the party around.
I think that's absolutely right. I think the SNP would be in a significantly worse position if it wasn't for John Sweeney. I think one of the things that people are talking about, the way that the vote share has fallen, but John Sweeney is by far the most popular leader, even amongst people that don't vote for him. And there is a real, I think actually when you consider how bad 24 is in just 2 years to come back and stabilize and build and to take 58 seats is crazy. You know, it is actually that there's scarcely been anything like that in the democratic societies. So after 20 years, about 19 years in power, to return 58 MPs, MSPs in a parliament which is designed for no one to have overall control is a phenomenal result. We fell short of the majority. That's absolutely true. Although, interestingly, the two-vote strategy in the Highlands was very, very important to us. So for those that aren't aware, we lost Skye, Lochaber and Badenoch. Aileen Munro fell against Andrew Baxter by about 700 votes. And we also lost Marie Todd in Caithness Sutherland and Ross, which is the campaign I was working on. But Marie was returned as an MSP by virtue of being first on the Highlands and Islands regional list. And if we hadn't pursued the both votes SNP strategy, we wouldn't have had Marie back. And that's important. Marie's the drugs and alcohol minister, but she was also an incredibly hardworking MSP. And she would have been a huge loss to the party. So, it was very, very important. And it really came down to about 500 votes between us and the Tories. And if we hadn't pursued that strategy, there wouldn't be an SNP regional thing. The good news is we've got 2 Greens in as well. So we've now got the regional list for the Highland broke down as 2 Green, 2 Reform, 1 SNP, 1 Lib Dem, and 1 Conservative. But it was nip and tuck. So yeah, it was really quite tense.
a good day for the SNP. Also, good to see more Green MPs getting in as well. I think the big scalp came in Glasgow City as well. Obviously, we can talk about what we want about reform, and it's going to be quite interesting now how the in Parliament and John Sweeney actually came out and said that he won't work with them. It was also interesting on Friday that Anna Sawa conceded about 2:30 in the afternoon as counts were just coming in. So I don't know if he knew something in all the media didn't know anything at all. But I don't know. I don't know if you heard that, Peter. But I thought I was a bit weird for him to concede about 2:30 on Friday afternoon when you had a lot of counts still to come in. So that was a bit weird to see.
I think on the face of it was, but I think what it really came down to was that I did actually watch that live. So I'd been teaching in the morning and I had to dash to the count. And that was on the screen around the time I arrived. I think that the truth is that Sarwar, for all his bluster and nonsense, is not a stupid man. And they hadn't, interestingly, I just was talking about the both votes SNP strategy. Labour didn't pursue a list strategy at all. You think the Tories and the Lib Dems were openly saying, vote for us on the peach ballot. They knew they weren't going to win constituencies. Labour didn't. Sarwar, I think, is a very self-confident man. I think you could argue possibly tipping over into arrogance. But he isn't stupid. And he knew that if they were going to form the Scottish Government, they needed to win constituencies. And by 2:30 in the afternoon, it became abundantly clear that they weren't going to do that. So I think he realised pretty quickly that that pretending that they were going to have won constituencies that would be enough to get them over the line just wasn't going to happen. And I'm assuming that's why he conceded. I agree with you, though. I'm not sure it was a great look. I suspect we're going to come on and talk about the various trials and tribulations of the Labour Party in the next few minutes. But yeah, I think it was him just kind of being pretty realistic about what their chances were of actually forming the next government.
Yeah, no, I did find that a bit weird how a leader of a party to announce that so early on in the day. Obviously, you see the shot of him coming in, but I didn't realise that he was going to speak to the press pack right away. So, and also, I think that caught the media scrum, as it were, kind of like off guard as well, and everybody watching it around Scotland and maybe down in Downing Street kind of thing. So yeah, that was kind of like quite interesting. So I suppose that his 5-year strategy has went out the window a wee bit, you would say.
It has. Have you ever done a count, Michael?
I haven't been along to one, no.
So it's quite interesting, particularly if you're there with a political party. So one of the things that you do is you sample the ballots. So when they're actually taking the ballots out of the boxes, you actually are doing a tick list to see how many votes you've got. And I suspect what happened is Sarwar walked into the centre and his activist came up and went, it's done. Because you can tell fairly quickly. You only need a couple of boxes to know roughly how it's going to play out, because you don't tend to get. You obviously do get variations within polling districts, but in general, you can kind of tell. So I suspect that's what happened. I suspect he went in and his activist went, "Oh no, it's just as bad as we thought it was going to be," and that was sort of game over. So before we come on to the Labour Party and the various things that's kicking off with them. I thought you might like to know just a couple of things. The oaths and affirmations and the election of a new presiding officer are scheduled for Thursday. The following week will be the official election of the FM, who will then put together a new government. And basically, by Thursday of that week, the cabinet briefings were coming in. I've not heard much in the way of rumours about who's going to get what cabinet briefing, but you're looking at about 8 days from now is the optimistic timetable. So for those who don't know, that should be quite good.
Yeah, no, just a quick theory, Peter. I might be horribly horribly wrong, and that's why I'm not a betting man. But I'll be interested to see how Stephen Flynn kind of like fits in Holyrood as well, because there were rumours about last year that he was going to take over the First Minister role. But I've got a theory that it could be the Deputy First Minister.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if I think the only reason that might not happen is that it's a fairly open declaration of patronage from the current First Minister, saying this is my anointed successor, and that could put people's backs up. But you're right. I don't. Obviously, Flynn's never had a cabinet post before. He's never had to run a department. He's never actually had to work with civil servants properly. He's always been a kind of official opposition, which is something that he's very good. You spoke about some of the scalps in Glasgow, but of course the other big news story out of the election was the loss of Angus Robertson to Lorna Slater in Edinburgh. And Joanna Cherry was promptly out parading around talking about how that was all about the gender recognition stuff. But actually, I think it was more to do with the fact that Angus has somewhat struggled to kind of really establish himself in that brief, I think. I think the difference between being a governing party and being perennially opposition, and your job is to noise up the government and create difficulties. I think that you're asking a lot of questions of whether Flynn can do that. I mean, I've no reason to assume he can't. He's clearly a very bright guy. But Deputy First Minister, I can see that. But of course, everybody says that Mary McCallan is a future potential leader. Stephen Gethins has also made the same trip. He also might fancy throwing his hat in the ring. So you might get a bunch of the kind of runners and riders who would be less happy than that. I'm told that Ivo Key?
Ivan McKee?
Ivan Key is apparently set to rise up. This is something I heard. So we'll see. I suspect Marie Todd should be in line for a cabinet job again, but whether it's full cabinet or whether she stays in the drugs and alcohol role that she does, I'm pretty certain she'll keep sport, because she absolutely loves being sports minister, and delights in telling everyone that she's Scotland's most successful ever Scotland sports minister, because she got the men to the World Cup, and she's the only one to ever have done that. So I suspect she'll keep that. But yeah, very interesting times.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Moving on, let's talk about the Labour Party then. So Anna Sarwar was declared early doors and is ready for, but has said that he's not going to resign. He said that he's going to hold on. His job is to keep his party together. What do you think about that?
Right. So basically, when you asked me during the campaign, what was your highlight of the campaign, I said basically going to the dentist and getting my tooth pulled out. But now that I think about it, the highlight was what Anna Sarwar said months ago about, because I remember, I think I was texting you that day, or whatever, I phoned you about 1:30 in the day when he called the press conference, and they asked Keir Starmer to resign. He kind of like put custard pie to his face himself, because basically, if you look back, there's no one behind you apart from maybe Jackie Bailey and a few other ones from Scotland. But if you look at the UK overall, maybe not the UK overall, but the cabinet at Westminster, they was like that. No. But I think they were trying to look after themselves when it came to the jobs as well. So I think it kind of puts, and someone else came out yesterday, Paul Sweeney, it said the Prime Minister should go, and that's the second Labour MSP I've heard saying that on another podcast as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. But Anna Sarwar, see, he's digging a hole for his own back here, Peter, right? Because he can't go back on his word now. He can only stick to it, move forward. But I don't think he's got I don't think he's got a credible leg to stand on after that comment and after the results as well. Coming second, that's to reform.
Yeah, I mean, joint second with reform is incredible, isn't it? To show you how far they've fallen. And I was just looking there to see if I could find. There was a graphic I saw the other day about the way that Labour's gone down from the various kind of different numbers of seats that they had, and it's just, I mean, it's just cratering, and they're just gone as a political force up here. They just don't have any credibility whatsoever. They don't represent the working class. Which was obviously their raison d'etre. We know that the demographics of who votes for Labour has wildly shifted, and that now they're the party of metropolitan graduates. But in Scotland, the party of metropolitan graduates mainly vote SNP, or are one of the other unionist parties, and we just divide on constitutional lines, and they're just not a credible force. And Sarwar is not a credible leader anymore. He set his stall out. He was going to be First Minister. They've had 20, give me 5, all of that stuff. And it hasn't worked. Nobody's listening. Now, he would argue that's because of Starmer. Okay, I'm sure we're going to come on to that. But, it doesn't matter. The fact is you dance with the one who brung you. And in Sarwar's case, he's tied to the Labour Party. They are a branch office. And that's not... We all, people on the pro-indie side of this argument always say, "Oh, well, we're their branch offices," and we use it as an insult. But actually, if you're a unionist party, there's nothing inherently wrong with being a branch office because you believe, presumably, that it's one country and therefore you should have branch office in the same way that there'd be the Newcastle Labour Party or whatever. The problem they have is where they pretend that they're not. That he's trying to make a separate case that we're a different Labour, but they're not. So you get sunk with your London neighbours, and that's true of the Lib Dems, it's true of the Tories. It will eventually be true of Reform. At the moment, they seem to be kind of skating under the radar for that. But it's what's going to happen. It has to be.
Sorry, Peter, and I was just going to say, and I think I'm going to stick with what I'm saying here, not with Peter Sammer kind of like flip-flopping. Here, I'm going to stick to it. And that's where you've got Labour, Reform, Conservative and Lib Dems all towing the party line because, and that's why I don't think you will ever see them form a government for years to come in Scotland because they will always have to toe the party line with Westminster of what they are saying. Whereas SNP and Greens are slightly different. Well, sorry, a lot different in that kind of way because they are kind of like independent. Not in that way, but you know what I mean. As for like parties, as I said, Labour, Conservatives, Lib Dems, they've always got to toe the party line, whatever their leader saying down at Westminster.
100%. And that's, you're right, the Scottish Greens and the SNP are the only two parties that are Scottish parties. They are by definition. And so you've got the issue that they don't have to worry about what Westminster is saying because that their concern is Scotland. And that people aren't stupid. They understand that. And one of the things that devolution is really showing is that these are different countries. Now, these are arguments you and I have rehearsed, and we agree with each other. So it's kind of not really much point in rehashing it all again. But it is true.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland.
Now, one of the parties that I think is perhaps dealing with this pretty badly is the Liberal Democrats, because the Liberal Democrats policy is actually, or at least was, home rule. So when you've got Charles Kennedy and the people that kind of the other big names, their policy was for far greater devolution, that you had a federated United Kingdom, that Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland were all independent and then worked together with a UK Parliament. And the same for England, because, of course, one of the kind of ironies of the current constitutional setting is that England isn't independent either. So it's interesting that in Alex Cole-Hamilton, they have a leader who is a unionist and sort of won't count. He said the same thing as Sarwar, didn't he, during those debates? I'll resign rather than put John Swinney back in Bute House and blah, blah, blah. Well, TikTok, Alex, off you trot. But they're not pushing their home rule agenda anymore, even though the polling would suggest that that's probably quite a popular position. Devo Max, in the true sense, home rule, is actually a majority kind of point of view. But he's not prepared to push that agenda. What was interesting in Caithness, Sutherland and Ross was the winner up here was a Liberal Democrat called David Green. He won basically because there was no opposition. So in other places in Scotland, Marie got over 30%. She would have won. But in Caithness, Sutherland and Ross, all of the opposition, all of the unionist votes coalesced around the Liberal Democrats. And so much so that Edward Mountain, the outgoing Conservative MSP, when he was at one of the hustings, was just openly telling people to vote for the Liberal Democrats. The Labour, the number one candidate on the Labour list up here, made a video telling people to vote Lib Dems and then vote for Labour on the list. They weren't even pretending. So it became an absolute independence versus unionist vote up here. And that's why David was able to get over the line. But if I was Alex Cole-Hamilton, I would be thinking very carefully, because David Green's acceptance speech, yes, he did the kind of Lib Dem bingo. He mentioned Jim Wallace, he mentioned Charles Kennedy, who were mentors to him, and he knew them very well. But he also reached out across the aisle towards Marie, thanked her for a clean campaign, thanked her wished the staff well, knows how difficult it is, blah, blah, blah. And I think what he actually did was signal a break with Alex Cole-Hamilton's policy of very aggressive responses to the SNP, and I think potentially was launching a leadership challenge. That was very much the feeling in the room, that this was a young man who has been in the Lib Dems a long time, was raised under Kennedy. He was one of Kennedy's spads about 15 years ago, and wants to go back to that consensus social democratic politics that Cole-Hamilton is moving them away. So I would say here and now, watch this space, because I think in a couple of years' time, you might hear a bit more about David Green exactly along those lines, because I don't think he's comfortable with the very aggressive, very negative politics of Cole-Hamilton. So yeah, there you go. That's my little sneak peek for you.
I think maybe I'm talking nonsense here, Peter, but I think you can get that with that MP and the Labour Party, Brian Leisman, because every time I hear him speak, I always think he's in the wrong party.
Yeah, 100%. I actually messaged an MP and said, "Can we not get him across?" Because he's in the old Labour Party or the SNP.
Yeah, but I'm not being funny here, right? But every time you hear him speak, it's nothing positive about the Labour Party. It's all negative.
Yeah, I think he's very fed up, to be honest, of how the Labour Party are acting, and I think he doesn't feel it represents his values at all. I'd love him to come across. I've got a lot of time for Brian Leishman, so I don't think that's nonsense at all.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland.
Right, moving on. So let's talk about the effect of all of this on the wider issues for Scotland, as we would say, put a kilt on it. So how's Keir Starmer doing, Michael? Is he thriving?
Yeah, he's top of my list, and Christmas cards and all the rest of it. But no, look, listen, I mean, I've got a lot of things to say about this, and I know that we might be short of time on this as well, but I think when they came in, I was like that. Okay, yeah, well, it's a bit like a football manager when he comes into the team. You're like that. Okay, he's got a bit of new ideas, but day one, he actually was cutting the fuel tax for elderly people, and then they went after disabled people. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, the Labour Party was designed for you know, like the poorest people in society, kind of like help them, giving them a kind of leg up, as it were. And I've been very disappointed about it as well. And also, he came in and they got like like free glasses, free this, free that, free, and nothing was said about it. It was okay. Nothing to see here. Move along. And it's just got worse and worse and worse as the weeks went on, and now it's came to the surface. But can I just say one thing, Peter, as well? Like yesterday, I don't know if you heard the press conference that I gave at uh, not. I don't know if it was down in state. It was basically he gave a press conference to his um, the Labour MP, so I thought that was a bit weird, mate. Why give it to the converted, basically? And B, he mentioned about a sister working for the NHS, and I'm thinking, well, see if I hear a politician coming out again and say, I've got a family member working for the NHS, and you're thinking, well, are you just saying that to get sound bites? Because if you are saying that, you should really know what's going on in the real world, i.e., wake up and smell the coffee, or else are they just getting people to feel sorry for them? But I just feel as though that's, why is he saying that? But also not helping the NHS in any kind of way. So, yeah, it all feels kind of weird and smoking mirrors and all that.
So I
Sorry,
think
that was my rant over.
no, I think it's a perfectly valid rant. To be honest, I think you're spot on. I think the truth is he doesn't have a governing philosophy and he doesn't have any new ideas. He promised change, he's delivered change. It's just been relentlessly negative. I believe the sister does work for the NHS. I think that's true. I've heard that before. But I think if you don't have any idea how to make it better, it doesn't matter that you know. I mean, I think one of the one aspect where I feel a little bit sorry for Starmer, and believe me, it's world's smallest violin time. But one of the things where I do feel a little bit sorry for him is that he's not actually who people think he is. Like he isn't as posh as people think he is. He went to a fairly normal school. He does have a fairly normal background. The knighthood is because he was the head of the public prosecution service. So he's like a kind of lower middle class guy that went to a state school. And then worked hard. He's the only prime minister that didn't go to Oxford. He went to Leeds University. He's fairly normal, but what he doesn't have is a guiding philosophy of why you're doing this stuff. So although he's far less posh than somebody like Farage and definitely than Johnson, to be fair to Johnson, he had an idea. Now his idea was, let me rake as much money as I can out of the country and just tell everyone that everything's fine, right? And he was a complete moral vacuum. But Starmer is if anything, is worse because he does know what's right and wrong, and he's drowning because he doesn't have a direction. And you're spot on. The glasses and all that stuff.
But you see that the point is, I saw the car cross you again, but the point is this, like, even Boris Johnson, before he became Prime Minister, we knew what it was going to be like. That's the whole point. And we didn't know what Keir Starmer was going to be like until he got onto power, and then the rest is history, as they say.
You're right. I mean, that's absolutely true. And of course, the issue is the guy who seized power in the Labour Party by being a Corbynite and promising free tuition fees and promising all this stuff was very quickly shed like a skin. And I think we're basically saying the same things. What it really comes down to is because he doesn't actually have a central governing philosophy of who he is. You're absolutely right. We knew exactly who Boris Johnson was. There was no surprise. When Nigel Farage comes in, we're going to know exactly who he is. It's not going to be a surprise. But with Starmer, he sheds skins left and right because he doesn't really know who he is. And so you have this issue where that makes it very... He manages, therefore, to disappoint absolutely everybody. So I suppose moving on from that, who's going to take over? Well, is he going to go? And as we are at the time of speaking, I believe he's at 71 people who have pledged to that he should set out a timetable for his resignation. That includes the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. So it's not exactly going brilliantly for him. Obviously, Wes Streeting has been in the mix for a while, and it was a bunch of his junior sort of bag people that that were calling for him to resign. So is he going to go, and who's going to replace him?
Okay, so who will be his replacement? I've heard Angela Rayner coming back into the mix. I'm sure you're not surprised me saying that. Wes Clayton is always one, because he's been in the mix from, I don't know, day one. Andy Burnham might come back into the mix as well. I think like the longest, as we were recording this, he's still the Prime Minister. But I think the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get for him. And also, don't forget, as we were recording this today, tomorrow's Prime Minister's question time. And Prime Minister's question time will be dominated by not the cost of living crisis, not the NHS, but his future. So I think it will be later on today. I think if he's still in office tomorrow, I would be very surprised at that.
And with saying that, I mean, so obviously Burnham's not an MP, so that leaves Rayner and Streeting as the two main contenders.
No, but no, but what I mean is like because Andy Keir Starmer blocked Andy Burnham from standing. That's kind of what I meant. So what I meant was his name might come back into the mix for that one. I'm not sure.
Oh, his name's definitely back in the mix. Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I just mean he's at the moment he's not eligible to stand.
Yeah.
You would either need to have make him a lord, or you'd need to find a handy by-election. Although I did see a fairly mischievous SNP supporter suggesting that maybe he should stand for Stephen Gethins's seat, go to the East End of Dundee and see how he gets on with canvassing. Of course, he could also take over the Scottish Labour Party at the same time and just bench.
You're listening to News Bite Scotland with Michael McEwan and Peter Newman.
Okay, so Michael, you also had some thoughts on Reform.
Yeah, so Reform got 17 seats in the Scottish Parliament as well. I might have to go on a bit of a Michael rant here as well. Am I surprised? No, I'm not actually surprised that they get in. Am I surprised that they get 17 seats? Yes, I am. But say what you want, they're in the Scottish Parliament. But I think the next bit for me, Peter, is it'll be interesting to see who works for them, who works with them. Obviously, the SNP says John Tweeney came out on Saturday, I think he said, and they basically said there's no way that we're going to work with Reform. But I think we got a bit of that in the TV debates as well. And I think Russell Finlay came out yesterday and said about that as well, not working with Reform. But I thought I was quite interesting, actually. So I think everybody will be happy in the Parliament, and Reform will be like that. Help.
So, just before I come back on the Reform stuff, absolutely, I think that's spot on. Russell Finlay has rejected John Swinney's invitation to Butte House as well. Sent a letter yesterday. Dear Mr. Swinney, thank you for your letter. Your invitation for a meeting is yet another SNP PR stunt which has been made in bad faith. I therefore decline. You have consistently refused to listen to the clear message that another divisive referendum on separating Scotland from the rest of the United Kingdom is unwarranted. In addition, you failed to secure a majority at the election, which you said was the threshold required for a referendum. You're already aware of my party's priorities, but I'm happy to repeat them. Cease any further activity about breaking up our country. Reduce the SNP's punishing income tax burden on hard-working Scots. Reduce the SNP's light touch benefit system, which is unfair and unaffordable. Back Scotland's businesses to grow the economy and increase prosperity. There is no point discussing shared priorities when it's clear that our positive vision for Scotland is fundamentally different to the path of mediocrity, division and decline favoured by the SNP. Yours sincerely, Russell Findlay. So I'm taking that as a no, although it is rich from Russell Findlay to talk about political stunts. But I think you're right, and there's also been an attack on John Swinney just this morning from Kevin McKenna in the Herald, saying that to lock reform out is cheap and pathetic gesture politics. So there seems to be a groundswell of opinion of the Swinney is never right, who will not work with reform. I, on the other hand, am delighted that they're refusing to work with reform. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's followed through on that pledge, and I would have been very, very upset. And I think you're right, it's very sad they got 17 seats, but on the other hand, that means that the vast majority of people in this country rejected reform, rejected racism, rejected that division, and I'm very, very pleased about it. I think we can stand pretty tall by the way we stood up. I will just give you one other caveat, though. One of my former pupils is one of the new MSPs for reform.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, that doesn't feel great, to be honest, Michael. That doesn't feel great. I think in education...
By the way, just a quick one on that one. Like, so see if the gig come in to the SNP in government, right? Johnson will get a lot of stick because you know that the SNP is about helping the poor and the needy and all that, and yet you've got Malcolm Offagan in government with 5 houses.
Yep.
So it doesn't make sense.
There's no place for them in that parliament. They were overheard at the count talking to each other saying, well, it's brilliant, we don't have any constituencies, so we don't have any responsibilities, we don't have to represent anybody, we can just do what we like. So there is an absolutely nakedly awful, cynical version of politics that they represent. They have no interest in the people of Scotland. It's just about self-enrichment.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a UK leader that's taking £5 million donations from crypto billionaires from whichever Gulf state it is. You just know this is about, you know, naked self-interest, and they're not even pretending to be anything other than that. Which, okay, fair enough, you get some points for being honest, but it's a pretty despicable way of approaching the world. Right, Michael, I am very conscious that is the 40-minute mark, so we are going to clamp our jaws shut for this edition of News Bite Scotland, our election wrap-up. I suspect we might end up having to fire some quick-fire content up if the Prime Minister does resign. We'll have to give our initial reaction, so look out for that. I have no idea who takes over. I think it's an absolute shambles. You know what I think, Michael? I think we need to be independent. Talking of independence, we are hosted and helped by Independence Live. You can hear the show again on Independence Radio. I'm very conscious that Independence Live, the costs appear to be going up. And if anybody would like to donate to Independence Live or to Independent Radio, I'm sure we will be able to put the details in the thing. So get in touch. Independent media is more important than ever. Michael, thank you ever so much for joining me.
Thank you.
You take care of yourself, and that is another edition of News Bite Scotland. Take care of yourselves, and if not, take care of somebody else.